Imagine waking up tomorrow and checking your bank account. It's deeper in the red than ever before. Your debt doubled, but instead of panic, the bank congratulates you. Your credit score goes up. People line up to lend you more money. And somehow, you feel richer than yesterday? That's not fiction. That's how governments work. Right now, some of the most powerful countries on earth owe more money than they have ever owed in history. And yet, they're spending confidently, borrowing cheaply, and acting like everything is under control. So today, we're answering a question that sounds insane but runs the modern world. Why can governments owe more and still feel rich? And why does that feeling last? Right up until it doesn't, let's start with why this suddenly matters. Because global government debt just crossed levels that used to signal emergency. In the past, when a country's debt got too big, bad things happened quickly. Currency collapses, defaults, IMF bailouts, political chaos. Today, the biggest debtors are the most powerful countries on earth. The US, Japan, Europe, and markets barely flinch. No panic, no sirens. Just business as usual, which should make you uncomfortable. Because either the rules of money changed, or we're misunderstanding what's really happening. To see why governments can feel rich while drowning in debt, we need to strip money down to its bones. Forget charts. Forget jargon. Think of money as a promise. When you borrow money, you're promising to pay it back using future income. Your salary, your business revenue. If your income is uncertain, lenders worry. They charge you more interest. Or they stop lending entirely. Governments play the same game, but with one crucial difference. Their income doesn't come from a job. It comes from an entire country. Taxes, fees, economic activity, and most importantly, time. Governments don't need to pay back all their debt tomorrow. They roll it forward. Old debt gets replaced with new debt. Year after year. Decade after decade. As long as the economy keeps running. The promise keeps holding. That alone already gives governments more breathing room than households. But it doesn't explain why they can owe absurd amounts and still feel wealthy. The real shift happened quietly. Over the last 50 years, governments stopped thinking like borrowers and started thinking like managers of a system. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most government debt is not meant to be paid off. It's meant to exist. Government bonds aren't a problem in the system. They are the system. Banks use them as safe assets. Pension funds depend on them. Insurance companies park money in them. Central banks build policies around them. Government debt is the financial plumbing holding everything together. So when a government issues more debt, it doesn't feel like borrowing, it feels like supplying oxygen. That's why markets often react calmly. When debt rises, sometimes they react positively. More bonds means more safe places to store money. Which leads us to the strange math that makes governments feel rich. What matters isn't how much debt exists. What matters is how heavy it feels. And that depends on two things: interest rates and growth. If a government owes 100 units of debt, but the economy grows faster than the interest on that debt, the burden shrinks over time. Not because the debt disappears, but because the country outgrows it. This is the magic trick. Debt stays flat. The economy gets bigger. The ratio improves. Politicians love this math. It lets them borrow without facing consequences immediately. As long as growth stays strong and interest stays low, debt feels light. This worked beautifully for decades, especially after the 2008 financial crisis. Central banks slashed interest rates sometimes to zero, sometimes below zero. Suddenly governments could borrow enormous sums and barely feel the cost. Imagine having a credit card that charges almost no interest. You'd swipe it without fear. That's what governments did. Debt exploded, but interest payments stayed manageable, so governments didn't feel poor. They felt powerful. They could stimulate economies, bail out industries, fund wars, pay for pandemics. Debt became a tool, not a threat. But here's where the illusion deepens. Governments also control the currency their debt is issued in. This changes everything. If you borrow in someone else's currency, you're vulnerable. If the currency strengthens, your debt becomes heavier. But when governments borrow in their own currency, they're playing a different game. They can always create more money, not recklessly, not without consequences, but the option exists. This doesn't mean debt doesn't matter. It means default is less likely, and markets care deeply about default. As long as investors believe a government can pay, they keep lending. Confidence becomes currency. That's why countries like the US can owe staggering amounts and still borrow cheaply. The debt isn't judged in isolation. It's judged against power, economic size, military influence, global trust. The dollar isn't just money, it's infrastructure. Global trade runs on it. Debt is priced in it. Reserves are stored in it. So when the US borrows, the world participates, not because it's generous, because it has to. This creates a feedback loop. High demand for government bonds keeps interest low. Low interest makes debt feel manageable. Manageable debt encourages more borrowing. And the system keeps moving. From the inside, it feels stable. From the outside, it looks absurd. But, which brings us to the part rarely discussed openly, the quiet trade-off. Governments feeling rich doesn't mean citizens are richer. It means the state has flexibility. It can spend without immediate pain, but that flexibility is bought by pushing costs into the future. Inflation, currency, dilution, asset bubbles. Debt doesn't vanish. It changes form. Instead of a visible bill, it becomes higher living costs, lower purchasing power, rising inequality between those who own assets and those who don't. This is why governments can feel rich. Even as people feel squeezed, they're not lying. They're operating on a different balance sheet. And now, the tension is rising because the math only works under certain conditions. Low interest, steady growth. High trust. Break any one of those, and the weight returns fast. Interest rates rise. Debt servicing explodes. Growth slows. The economy can't outpace obligations. Trust cracks. Borrowing costs spike overnight. We've seen this movie before. Not in big reserve currencies, but in smaller countries. Argentina, Greece, Sri Lanka. At first Sri Lanka. At first, debt felt manageable. Then one assumption broke, and suddenly the system demanded payment. Not gradually, all at once. The difference today is scale. The biggest debtors are important. Their problems don't stay local, they ripple. If governments can't feel rich anymore, markets won't either. So here's the irony. Debt makes governments feel powerful right now, but it also ties their future to variables they don't fully control. Demographics, productivity, global confidence, and unlike households, governments can delay consequences for a long time, which makes the eventual adjustment sharper. So, the real question isn't whether governments can owe more and still feel rich. We already know they can. The real question is this: how long can a system built on promises, growth, and trust keep everyone calm before someone decides to stop believing?